of lessons, but the thing is, if you don't try these options, you would never know. And sometimes that's the problem that we have. We're always looking for, the best solution. And the truth of the matter is there's no blueprints. We're all learning as we go along. And
Good day and welcome to another episode of Connecting the Dots. I'm joined by my dear friend Anita Otubu on this podcast. Anita, how are you?
very well, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Your journey in the power sector has been a very interesting and fast one, given where you're coming from as a legal practitioner in the UK. You set up the power sector and you've done a lot of amazing things. Could you walk us through that journey?
Uh, Being very or far too kind with your words. Yeah, so like you said, started off as a lawyer. So finished law school in the UK, actually did my entire schooling in the UK, worked for a bit in the Home Office. That's the British Home Office, Prisons and Ombudsman's Office, and then a company called Tribal, providing project management support for government institutions in the UK before I decided to move to Nigeria. Thereafter, started working in NPC under the NYSC program. And that's when I realized that, oh, I think I could actually live in Nigeria. That's when I actually fell in love with my country of origin.
Why did you want to come back from the comfortable UK to the crazy Nigeria?
I mean, I love the UK, born and raised there. However, I didn't feel like there was much for me to contribute. There wasn't really much value add. I felt as though the country was more than developed. All that was lacking was perhaps flying cars. And I clearly wasn't going to be the one to build a flying car. And so, having, always traveled with my mom, my sister to Nigeria on holidays, Easter, Christmas, etc., had a strong connection to home. And at the same time, always experienced the challenges with everybody else in terms of there not being light, sometimes no running water, and all of the other um, issues, challenges that we all experience on a daily basis. And I just thought to myself, why not come home and be a part of the solution as opposed to those in the diaspora who are constantly always complaining about Nigeria?
Mm.
Why not use my skill set? Why not use my experience, my education to come and give back to a country that I also belong to?
How did you fall into the power sector?
So it was an interesting one. I was working in a law firm, Anna Blankson in Nigeria. So that's after I worked at NNPC, then went to law school and I decided to move back to Nigeria. After law school, found myself in this amazing law firm and happened to have a client who was a special advisor to the Minister of Power at the time, Professor Nebo. And working on some projects, and I really got interested in the sector. And I guess the rest is history in terms of, the connection that was made. And then I was fortunate enough to be offered or appointed as the technical advisor to the Minister of Power as it
Yep.
pertained to legal services in the sector.
Interesting.
Mm,
I remember those days, right?
yeah.
The War Room, Room 505,
Yeah.
Ministry of Power, Family Sector. And those days were so unique because it was 15, 20 people trying to solve this problem
Yeah.
of power on the on-grid side. And a lot of effort was made. The sector wasn't quite moving at the pace that it should have been moving in. Is that the reason why you pivoted and went on the off-grid side? Because there's a bit more control on that side to be able to move things along.
Not really.
Mm.
It just literally happened that way, as you know, with the change of administration, it meant change of jobs. To be quite frank with you, my goal at the time was simply to ensure that everybody had access to electricity, whether it was via grid access or off-grid access. And at the time when we were working with the Honourable Minister, it was really about solving the on-grid um, challenges. Now, fast forward to having the opportunity to work in the Rural Electrification Agency, which mainly focuses on bridging that energy access gap in rural communities. That's when I was exposed to, the significant, um, I guess, challenges faced by those in the most remote communities. And I guess I fell in love with it because you realize that, yes, we were not having a great time with power being sort of epileptic in the urban communities and the peri-urban communities. But when you now think about those in the rural communities that don't have access whatsoever, it just makes it more meaningful and you become a lot more passionate about the work.
Would you say that the impact of the work that REA does is a bit more noticeable than some of the things we've done on the grid side?
Um, for me, it would be noticeable just because I predominantly or yeah, mainly work in the off-grid sector, off-grid space. So I don't want to take away credit from those who are trying to solve the challenges faced by the on-grid sector. Um, but yeah, definitely it's what I'm exposed to. It's what I work on a daily basis. So it appears to me as though there's a lot more tension, a lot more effort and impact, coming out of that space, especially with the support of development partners, with IFIs such as the World Bank, African Development Bank, the GIZ, the then USAID, NIAF, let me not, forget NIAF, who we also worked with as well. Yeah.
Interesting. So if I guess I should help educate the audience a little bit about the work you did. You were head PMU of a $750 million program,
550 million at the time.
$550 million
Yeah.
program, which is a massive amount of money. Could you tell the audience what were some of the accomplishments of that program?
Absolutely. And to be honest with you, I gave myself a goal before I left. I said I have to ensure that I achieve at least 1 million connections that will impact or provide access to electricity for a minimum of 5 million people.
Wow.
And that's exactly what I did before I left, just to ensure that that foundation was there. Clearly, we know it's just a drop in the ocean when we're talking about 80 million. There are about people who don't have access to electricity, but just being able to show that it can be done, proving concepts in terms of the different types of technology that works and business models as well, particularly showing how public-private partnership can truly, attract the necessary investment and talent required to solve, the energy access crisis in the country.
And it's interesting when you say 1 million connections. The guy sitting in California doesn't understand what that means in this context. Could you explain the types of connections or what a connection means and the type of solutions NEP deployed?
So a connection is simply a household, a public institution, MSME, any building that gets connected or household that gets connected to a particular technology or solution. Such solutions include solar mini grids, right? So you have the mini grids that connect an entire community, right? Or economic cluster of shops or businesses. And then you have your standalone solar solutions, right? So, which include, small scale, so tier 1, tier 2 solar home systems, right? For those very remote communities that perhaps have like minimal load demand and may not have economic capacity or financial capacity to pay for, a lot more power supply because most times they don't need that much power supply. And then you have the captive power plants, right? So that's where you as an institution or company or entity, you build a power plant for which you're going to consume the power that's generated from that power plant. So let me put it in clearer English. Um, So a captive power plant essentially is where you are generating power supply for your own consumption. So you're not generating power supply for a third party, it's for yourself. Just like having your own generator
Yeah,
at
precisely.
home, but it's a larger scale generator. So for example, the Energizing Education program, which I also project managed, this is where we built captive power plants for federal universities.
Oh, interesting.
Yep. And so the captive power plants were solar hybrid solutions, so
Hmm.
solar batteries. Yes, there were backup generators for the nighttime load as well. But these captive solutions were built solely for the purposes of supplying electricity to those universities, and the universities were the owners of those captive power plants too.
That's really unique because when you see videos of Nigerian universities, most struggle with power supply and infrastructure challenges.
Yeah.
The universities you helped electrify, have you had a chance to review what the school now looks like now as far as what the infrastructure is there now with the constant power supply?
To be very honest and transparent, unfortunately, not recently, but at least 2 to 3 years post implementing those projects, uh, I used to get text messages
I
from
bet.
the vice chancellors literally praying for me and saying, Anita, thank you. You know, if not for this solution that the Rural Electrification Agency, which the government of Nigeria brought to our schools, we would not have had the conducive learning environments that we now have because there is more reliable power supply, right? But at the same time, there's lots of lessons from that program too, because we adopted two different models. So you do have some universities that are very happy and they're still enjoying the power supply and they've made significant savings because they don't have to pay uh, or spend so much on diesel for their generators, right? But then unfortunately, there are also a few other universities in which we adopted a different approach because it was based on the design of the EPC contractor at the time, where they were not too satisfied with the solution because of the small battery storage system that was
Hmm.
deployed in those universities, which were not sufficient enough to really take on the nighttime load. And it meant that they had to heavily rely on the diesel generators. So, just for more context, there was a design where you had a massive battery storage system. And as a result, there was no need to really rely on diesel generators. It was PV in the daytime, batteries
And
nighttime. At the most, probably 1 hour worth of you putting on the generator, if that, right?
okay.
And so they saved significant money, right? So they were really happy. But then there was a different model and design adopted by another EPC contractor in which smaller battery storage system was designed. And this was because they had in mind, they considered the ability or the capacity of the universities to be able to replace these battery storage systems. They were like, it didn't make sense for them to have to invest in a huge battery storage system. And then when you have to replace the batteries, the university doesn't have the funds to do so. And like I said, lots of lessons. But the thing is, if you don't start, if you don't try these options, you would never know. And sometimes that's the problem that we have. We're always looking for, the best solution. And the truth of the matter is, there's no blueprints. We're all learning as we go along. And when you think about the West, they try, they learn from it, and they improve.
Hmm.
They're hardly ever really complaining. It's like, okay, great. They don't see it as a failure. It's more of, okay, this is how we improve upon that model, and replicate.
There's always a conversation around these large government projects are funded by a third party, what's the payment model for the universities? Are they actually using their funds to service the plants, or is it kind of run by the EPC for the number of years that they're working on site?
So I can't say what the current situation is, but at the time when I led phase one, and at least phase two up into the contraction, let's say contraction, the contract, the contract stage, the contracting stage. Um, the model was to have the EPC contractor also provide O&M services for a minimum of 1 year.
Okay.
And then hand over to the universities who would have the option of re-engaging the O&M contractors to continue with the service, or to have the staff within those universities who were trained by the O&M contractors to take over.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Interesting. And then just from a sustainability point of view, making sure these projects last for the time they're supposed to last. What was that model to ensure that they actually last the duration?
Yeah, I mean, there was a sustainability plan that was
Oh,
developed. It
very
was
good.
developed by McKinsey, who, are very well versed and experienced in this type of these types of programs or projects. And essentially, it provided for a governance structure and a financial model that would allow for, sufficient, I guess, saving, well, how do I put it? So putting funds aside, right, for the replacement of major equipment like the batteries, PV panels, although PV panels tend to last for at least 15 to 25 years, as well as obviously putting enough funds aside for the operations and the maintenance of these plants. And then just having a governance structure where you have, buy-in from key stakeholders, right? So whether it's representatives from the university, perhaps from the Ministry of Finance, CBN, where the allocation, the budgetary allocation comes from, not CBN, but the same Ministry of Finance or budget and planning, having them be members of the board, right? They would understand what the requirement is to sustain. Like if you're presenting a proposal that says, look, you need these funds in order to pay for this and this and this, because they're kept in the loop, they're carried along, they would understand the need and ensure that sufficient funding is made available. Because these universities, they do get an allocation from the federal government. But the question is, how adequate, how sufficient are those funds that are being directed to the university? So if they're part of the governance structure, right, you have these key stakeholders, key decision makers, part of the governance structure, they're more likely to, ensure that sufficient funds is made available in order to ensure that these projects and universities are kept running for long periods of time. And then obviously ensuring that you have the right capacity, right? So the training was part of the sustainability model in terms of training staff to also be a part of the team, having, you know, uh, technically qualified staff or team or company who can operate these plants, who have the experience. This was all part of the sustainability plan.
That's that's super interesting because I think when I look at some projects that come and go, um, if it's not if you don't have a proper plan to keep it going,
Mm-hmm.
it will fall apart.
Absolutely.
And once it does, people will say, well, government should. So it's really amazing that you guys set this up. So TA to the Minister Legal, head EEP one.
Head EEP 1 and 2. 2 fell under the Nigeria electrification project.
That's right. That's right.
And also head EEP 3 until I left. Yeah. 1 to 3. So at least I was part of the process of identifying the universities, getting key stakeholder buy-in, conducting the necessary feasibility studies and all of that.
And
It
then
is
you then move to be head PMU for the entire
for the
project.
entire program, yeah.
Huh. That must have been a very unique role, given that at that point, there wasn't a lot of activities going on the grid side because we had all those payment challenges. So,
Mm.
how were you able to differentiate and push the REA agenda at that point?
I mean, we've been really fortunate. I'm honestly super proud of the Nigerian government, um, which has been pretty consistent for the past 10 years. And you can disagree with
Such a
me.
different, this is an interesting statement.
I mean, you could disagree with me, but I've seen a lot of political will, you know, from governments as it pertains to investing in supporting providing that enabling environment for private sector investment and participation for the development of decentralized renewable energy solutions for those who do not have access to electricity.
I agree. NERC just released a statement report that said there are 300 mini grid companies in Nigeria.
Yeah. And that's really because that enabling environment is there. You have relevant like NERC has done a fantastic job with, the relevant mini grid regulations, captive power plant regulations. I believe there are others that support, whether it's decentralized or interconnected with the main grid. Um, those laws, those regulations are there to attract and protect private sector investment. And then, you know, from a finance point of view, providing the necessary incentives, you know, Ministry of Power, Rural Electrification Agency, in securing the $550 million that you mentioned for the Nigeria Electrification Project, and subsequently the $750 million for the DARES program, simply to address this energy access issue in our rural communities and some peri-urban communities as well, in order to attract that private sector investment and participation. And even, you could also talk about the fact that they've taken steps to even provide sufficient data for private sector companies to come in and make informed decisions as to where to even invest in.
That's the Odyssey platform and
your integrated energy planning toolkits, right, where you're able to identify communities that are connected and not connected, how dense the population is, how close the households are from each other.
and this is all online, free.
Yeah,
charge.
I believe so. Sustainable Energy for All has supported the government with providing this platform. And I believe there's a number of ground truthing exercises that have also taken place. I'm sure that I believe the data is out there where, you're able to even ascertain at, ground level, what's the level of economic activity in those communities too. How many of them are MSMEs, public institutions, and all of that. In order to, ascertain capacity and willingness, ability to even pay for the electricity as well. So data is being made available. Laws, regulations are available to protect investment. Finance, incentives are being made available to attract this participation. So for me, and this is in no way trying to discredit or discredit the efforts on the onward sector, but it's simply that I haven't been following as much as I do in offgrid. So I believe that I hope there's work being done on the onward space. Yeah.
We are making progress in the on-grid space. There's a few things that have happened that are happening. On the NIAF side, we help the government of Nigeria write the integrated resource plan that lays out a 25-year outlay to give the sector a plan how we should develop. So I think those things are important because right now we don't have the coordination that we did a a decade ago, just because of how things have turned out. But I want to quickly just turn to the work you've done. You led this program, and then clearly it was time to do something different. So you went on to become the senior director at SC for all under their UEF program. Could you say a little bit more about that?
Yes, the Universal Energy Facility. It's a results-based financing program, very similar to the Nigeria Electrification Project and the program, in the sense that it supports private sector companies with grants to subsidize the capital expenditure of deploying these decentralized solutions, such as mini grids and standalone solar for productive use. And the idea behind it is to, I guess, address the viability gap. So to make these projects economically viable, as well as to address the affordability gap as well. So we're not just putting money into pockets of private sector, but we're also, providing these grants. So, the cost of the electricity is a lot more affordable for the end users who happen to be in rural communities.
Who funds these grants?
So it's funded by multiple donors. With regards to the Universal Energy Facility, I'm really um grateful to our partners, which include the Rockefeller Foundation, IKEA Foundation, Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, GIZ, the then USAID, FCDO, Good Energies. I'm really trying not to forget anyone. Our current donor, who I'm super grateful for, is the EU delegation to Sierra Leone. Let me just think for a second in case I'm missing. Shell Foundation, Carbon Trust, yep.
It's
Um,
a lot of people.
yes,
A lot
a
of,
lot of them. Not enough, right? It's a long list, but the amount of funds that you need to bridge the gap of 600 million
yeah,
people
600 million Africans don't have
in
access to power.
yeah, it will require a lot more participation and support and philanthropic capital, right, to attract the type of finance needed for this challenge that we're faced with on the continent.
So it sounds like you Nigeria is still one of the places you is Nigeria one of the places you work in, and what are the other countries as well?
Still work in Nigeria. We've actually just concluded our program in Nigeria where we deployed well, not we, but through our partners, the solar companies, if we want to call them that, where we provided them with grants to subsidize the cost of standalone solar for productive use
Okay.
systems, which were deployed in economic clusters. So this is slightly different to our programs in the other countries where it's more focused on displacing or replacing diesel gen sets with standalone solar solutions, right? Think about it when you go into the markets, we'll say market, for example, and you're hearing the noise of the generators, you're seeing the pollution, the smoke coming out of the generators, and then the costs of, fueling those generators. With these standalone solutions, it's really helping Nigeria achieve its net zero goals in terms of its transition goals, right? So yes, we're trying to bridge the gap in those communities that don't have access, but for those who have some access and that access isn't so clean, where we can make some quick wins. This is where we're deploying these standalone solutions. Like get rid of your diesel generator, put in these standalone solutions, and we've been able to, prove that, shops in these markets have been able to open for longer hours in the day. They've been making a lot more money in terms of, like, let's say the tailors, because they're open for a lot longer. Their machines are powered. They're getting a lot more clients. They're hiring more staff. They're creating jobs. So we've been seeing a lot of value add with that solution. However, in the other countries we're working in, So for example, Madagascar, Sierra Leone, Republic of Benin, and DRC, we are working with the mini grid technology. So these mini grids are being deployed in rural communities, so off-grid communities. And then we're also in Zambia. Zambia has its own unique program or unique features to the UEF program. In this case, this is where we are supporting, the operational side of things. So it's no longer CapEx, but more so OpEx support. So we are encouraging, we found that in some countries, there is the existence, the presence of mini grids. And Zambia is pretty unique. This is where we've been given the privilege to support the Zambian government with the development of 1,000 mini grids in Zambia, with the support of our partner, Rockefeller Foundation. We're working hand in hand with this program where, there are two parts to this. So yes, hopefully we'll get to the point where we're able to develop up to 1,000 mini grids in the country. But right now it's to understand what the issues are with the current mini grids that are not operational in the country, right? That don't have sufficient uh, uptake or low demand, and therefore not making these mini grids so viable. And we're working on a solution to get these mini grids up and running again and to make them viable. And once we're able to, establish this model that works, that will ensure the sustainability and effectiveness and economic viability of these projects, then we can replicate. Because what you don't want is to develop huge numbers of mini grids and they're just left there, stranded. You want to ensure that they're fit for purpose. And so with this program, we're supporting or incentivizing companies to go out and get their end users engaged with productive use equipment and appliances that would allow for them to be able to also generate revenue, right? Which in turn will be used for their own, means of livelihood, as well as to be able to pay for the power that's being consumed.
That's really interesting. 1,000 mini grids is a very aggressive number, but I also know that there's a bit of struggle with power supply there. Will you guys fund that entire process, or would you now bring in private sector participants to help?
Same model, private public partnership, right? I'm sure you've heard of Mission 300, which is a program or initiative established by the World Bank and the African Development Bank, with support of which is being supported by the Rockefeller Foundation, Global Energy Alliance for People and Planet, and Sustainable Energy for All. Zambia is one of those countries that will benefit from, the support that will come from this program to address, I guess, the energy access issues.
Um, just taking it back a step around technology and around innovation. You've been in this off-grid space for the last probably 10 years, 2016. Yeah.
When were we with Professor Nebo?
2013 to 2015.
So how many years? I'm a lawyer. I can't.
10 years solid.
Okay.
How have you seen the technology and innovation change in the space?
I mean, we've seen some changes. We've seen some, I mean, the mini grids, the captive solar hybrid power plants, the standalone solutions now have the mesh grids, which is, a cross between a mini grid and a solar home system put together. Beyond those solutions, yeah, I believe people are still, doing some research, right? And yeah, but at the moment, those are really, and I'm sure some people have probably be commenting if this is being posted on YouTube that there are a lot more solutions, but these are the solutions that are that we have been, supporting um through
But I
my
think
role as Sustainable Energy for All.
also the models have changed. Models are part of the innovative process because
Okay.
remember back in the day, there were mini grids that they put out and they just put it in communities without the productive users. Then it was like, no, we
Right.
must
Okay.
have an anchor load.
Okay, sorry. I thought you just meant in terms of technologies.
No,
Yeah, the
yes.
business model. So yeah, absolutely. So when I used to lead the Nigeria electrification project, there was a productive use equipment and appliances component as well to, I guess, address the viability aspects and to ensure that these projects, these mini grids, were sustainable. However, at the time, the developers were not as forthcoming as they are now, being that they were sort of just even new to the market, they were just
Hmm.
establishing themselves and their businesses. They needed to understand just how to even create this business.
Hmm.
And so telling them that they would add this additional type of service, to their business model, a number of them did come back to me and they said, Nita, this is great, but right now, I'm not ready to apply. I'll apply later. I just need these guys to at least pay for the basic power we're giving them.
Hmm.
If we add these productive use equipment and appliances, that's going to see an increase in the load demand. We're not sure if they're able to pay. We don't even understand how this really fits into our business model, you know. And that was really because they were, new. It was an emerging subsector. Everyone was just trying to learn the basics of just running a mini grid,
Hmm.
right? But now, developers very much interested. They're looking for these programs
Yeah,
to supplement or complement their mini grid businesses because they understand the impact, on the business as a whole in terms of generating revenue and ensuring that these mini grids are, supplying at capacity, full capacity.
yeah, no, definitely the models have definitely changed from
Mhm.
what they were
Yeah.
before.
You even have with the solar home systems or the standalone solar solutions where, some companies have gone from just selling outright to providing these solutions, as via energy as a service,
Yeah.
business model. And which I love that model because it ensures the maintenance,
Hmm.
right? And just provides more customer service support as well. When there are issues, there's someone to call as opposed to someone that's like, oh, you bought it 3 months ago. It's past the time you can return it. There's someone that will come that will fix it. And it's just like having electricity from your main grid,
Hmm.
right?
And just a lot of the work you did, you've done in the space has been successful. What are the key drivers to succeeding in this government space for energy access?
For me, the most important key driver is having sufficient buy-in from key stakeholders.
Okay.
You know, what you don't want to do is to design a program and just implement it without significant consultation,
Mhm.
right?
So like
So
a coordinated approach with everybody on the same table.
absolutely, it's important. You need to bring everyone to the table. This is the idea. Let's brainstorm. Can this work? Can this not work? From the regulatory side of things, engaging them. Is this allowed? Right? Um, just government as a whole, in terms of ensuring that, if they're aware of these programs, they're more likely to support the program and issue the necessary licenses,
Hmm.
permits, no objections,
Hmm.
right? Whether it's for an ESIA or it's for a mini grid permit or whatever. It's really important to get their buy-in, and even from the private sector too. You can design a program, and at the end of the day, the private sector companies who are the beneficiaries of these programs turn around and they're like, this does not favor us.
Mm-hmm.
This is not helpful. This is far too complex. Your process is complex. Can you make it more simplistic?
Mm-hmm.
No, we don't need funding here. We need funding here.
Mm-hmm.
So engaging uh private sector, if down to the end users as well. Though um for the energizing education program, the end users were, the universities.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, engaging them too, getting their take on what is needed, right? Before you just go in and you deploy solutions, because you want them to feel a sense of ownership as well. Because if there's no sense of ownership, these projects can go abandoned, right?
Yeah, for sure.
And it has an impact on the sustainability of these projects. So from government to private sector to the end users, the beneficiaries, they all need to be carried along. They all need to be consulted. Also, development partners as well, because you don't know, and IFIs, you don't know how they can support from a financial perspective as well. They can bring in um, philanthropic capital that can help attract private sector equity and debt that perhaps, governments may not be able to raise,
Mm-hmm.
right? They're able to support private sector companies in raising this. So just bringing everybody to the table. Everyone has a role to play. Effective coordination, as you said, of key players, key stakeholders. That's my key learning, right? Working across, the various programs that I've worked in, that I believe has contributed to the success of these programs, because it's not something you can do by yourself. It's a team effort. It's an ecosystem effort.
Precisely. And I think looking back at the time in the industry, the PTFP was an amazing animal that really made things work because everyone was coordinated under one platform and we're able to really drive some of the things around the power sector privatization. So I agree that that's a really important skill set, and it's something that we should do more of if we want to see the sector grow. Maybe just the last question would be, there's a number of people who still are doubters about grid and how you can grow an economy and all that noise. What would you tell them as to the scale and the potential and the impact DREs can have on the freaking scale?
You can't apply a one size fits all approach to the challenge or challenges faced
Mm.
on the continent when it comes to access to electricity, right? You have to ask yourself, does it make economic sense for the main grid to be extended, to the most remote rural community that has perhaps less than 50 dwellers that are not engaged in any real economic activity, where households are super sparse from one another? The amount of money investment that will go into putting up that infrastructure
Outrageous, yeah.
at this stage, at this time when, we're limited with funds, is that the best approach? Or would the best approach be to deploy some standalone solar solutions, right? Or for, communities where it's slightly more dense,
Mm-hmm.
not too far away from the grid, but perhaps maybe the discos at this time do not have
Yeah.
funding
Mm-hmm.
to get, to extend the grid to these communities, right? Mini grids can also be interconnected into the main grid. So when the main grid does arrive, there's also opportunities to, you know, interconnect the technology, the main grid to the decentralized or mini grids,
Yeah. Uh-huh.
right? I think what's important is to ensure that what's being deployed in terms of the quality and the standards of, the infrastructure is acceptable and is of, good standing, I guess, or not good standing. It's of great high quality and standards that, the discos will be willing
to take on.
take on.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I guess the point here is it's not obviously larger scales, larger grids are more economic and X, Y, and Z.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, that's not the approach that's going to fix the entire continent. It's a structured approach of what's the best use case here,
Yeah.
get that, and then keep moving that forward.
And don't get me wrong, that approach can fix the entire energy access crisis, but how long will that take? And how much money will it cost? How
Economically,
much
if it
will it
does.
cost?
And that's a thing we also realize if you show up to do business here and you're not able to return and revenue assure your money, you're not going to put $1
Exactly.
in the project.
Exactly.
No matter how much I love the people from X, Y, and Z community, I show up and I'm like, no. I'd much rather walk away than lose my shirt.
The sector is privatized,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's profit driven.
Precisely.
And this is why you need, incentives from government to attract private sector investment in those not so attractive communities, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, as I'd said, you cannot apply the one size fits all approach.
Yeah.
And if you do, it's going to take a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to take a lot of time. And we have a goal that by 2030, as per the SDG 7 rather, of achieving universal access for everyone. That's in 5 years' time. 600 million. And as I'd mentioned, Mission 300 is looking to solve half of that.
Someone has to do the other half and do it
quickly. The amount of investment needed to do that, it would be a lot more if we're talking about extending the main grid everywhere.
Precisely. Anita, this has been amazing. Really look forward to having you on the podcast.
Over so soon.
Time.
I'm just getting started.
You're just getting started. Yes. We'll definitely have you back for part 2. But this has been good, and I really thank you for all the work you've done. And we'll see you soon. Thank you so much, Mecca, and really proud of you and all the work that you've been doing. I'm so happy that you also stayed on coming from the United States to Nigeria to build our nation that we love so dearly. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. All right. This podcast is brought to you by Next Year Capital, committed to driving conversations that shape Africa's energy future. Please subscribe, share, and stay tuned. Until next time, I am Emeka Okpukara Jr., and this has been Connecting the Dots.